Monday AI agents took over my work. And I absolutely love it. Chasing deadlines, writing status reports, updating stakeholders. Agents handle the daily grind now. They live inside Monday.com, so they see the full picture. My work, my team, the whole company. And I don't have to worry about the data. It's safe, which means I'm free to focus on the big stuff, knowing everything runs smoothly in the background. It's completely shifted the way we work. Create your own AI agent in minutes on Monday.com.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to the No One Told Us podcast. I am so excited for today's guest. I've been a huge, both professional and personal fan of our guest today for a very long time. Today we're welcoming Dr. Pamela Douglas, who is an Australian GP and researcher with nearly 4 decades of experience working with families. She is a breastfeeding medicine physician and fellow of the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine. She's also an adjunct associate professor with the School of Medicine at Griffith University and a senior lecturer with the General Practice Clinical Unit at the University of Queensland. And she's authored a best-selling book for parents of infants, which is a book that I love in my library, The Discontented Little Baby Book. She also works now mostly with the Possums Program, which many people have probably heard of. It's starting to gain a lot of popularity here in the States as well. And we're going to dive into everything possums and everything babies today with Dr. Pam. So thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Well, thank you very much, Rachel. It's a great pleasure to be chatting with you. And I'd also like to thank you for your fabulous work in this space.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's my pleasure. Now, we're going to get into sleep, feeding, sensory. I love how you talk about these things as they work together because so often they're separated, right? And they're treated as all of these different problems. And I love your approach because it really looks at all of them together.
That's fundamental. It's true.
Before I start with my questions, I have to get this one out of the way because I've just always been so curious where the name Possums came from, because I feel like there has to be a story there.
Well, it is true that originally it was an acronym. I was way back. So this is sort of in the 2000s leading up to 2010. I was working with a professor in general practice who said, everyone's looking for acronyms. And I was skeptical, but came up with a few. And the one that I settled on at the time was Possums, which you don't even need to know what it stood for because within a year or two, we'd completely left behind the fact that it was an acronym. Because the truth is, in Australia, and I know this isn't true necessarily in the US or even in New Zealand, possums in Australia, we feel very fond of them. And we'll often call our children, as a term of endearment, Poss or Possy or Possum. So, And possums, they are marsupials. They do have the little ones up close to their bodies. So It's just really become a term that seems to work. And the formal name for the programs is Neuroprotective Developmental Care, but folks out there know us as Possums, the Possums Program, the Possums Social Enterprise.
Okay, I love that. That's very funny too that it's seen as a term of endearment or like a cute. I feel like here in the United States we think of possums as like very creepy creatures that just come out at night and like people don't like them.
I know, whereas we love our possums in Australia. So the logo is a little ringtail possum and its mum. Yeah, so we definitely adore possums.
Very cute. I like it.
Yeah.
So what was happening? Take us back to kind of the origin of the Possums Program and kind of just like what you were thinking, because you must have seen things in your clinical practice that kind of made you feel like what was out there for parents wasn't cutting it. The advice that they were getting was misguided or wrong or just wasn't working in real life. So what was kind of that moment where you thought, okay, I think I need to do something for parents to get actual evidence-based information that's going to help them and not make them more stressed and anxious?
Yeah. Well, so I've been a GP since 1987, and from the early 1990s, after I'd had my own kids, which is often the way, and had become an international board certified lactation consultant as well as a GP. I also noticed at this time in the early is that the diagnosis of gastroesophageal reflux disease was being used to explain unsettled behaviour in babies, when I could see that really what we were dealing with was very often sort of identified feeding challenges. And I could also see that the distress that families were experiencing around sleep was often being inappropriately medicalised, had strong interconnection with what was happening around feeds, and that a whole suite of advice was being given to parents across feed, sleep, maybe sensory motor needs, that was really unhelpful. So it's quite a distressing place of cognitive dissonance, really, to be working in the clinic with such a gap between what was there in the research as I started to look, because I really started to go into the research, and the dominant advice that our families were receiving when they had a baby. So much, I felt so much unnecessary suffering, really, actually, for those new parents, for that vulnerable new mum. And increasingly, this became a focus for me, so that I started to publish in the research literature from 2005. And then over the intervening 20 years, really, have built up the evidence base of neuroprotective developmental care, or the Possums programs, which, as you say, Rachael, and it's such music to my ears to hear you so get how all of this is interconnected, that if we're going to do anything approaching holistic care for our families with babies, we can't think of sleep alone. We can't think of lactation medicine or lactation support alone, or indeed an infant's development, particularly through the lens of sensory motor needs, separately. We need to understand and sort of rethink some of what parents are being taught about the baby's gut. We need to make sure that we've got a healthy bub and that there's nothing medical going on,
Yes.
And then, of course, the way all of this is so intimately connected with parent emotional and mental health. So that if we're genuinely committed as a health system to giving optimal support to the well-being of those parents, of that mother of a baby, perinatal mental health has to be understood in the context of these other domains too.
Yes.
So that's kind of been, if you like, the broad territory that my life has called me to follow, out of sort of general practice until 2018, when I really just shifted my focus entirely in the clinic to supporting families with babies and toddlers. And then, of course, all the research and education work around possums.org, Big Build, which is where parents go for the Possums programs, and then the NDC Institute, which is where health professionals are upskilled in our courses. And indeed, most recently, while I'm on this little role, Rachael, the Lactation Fellowship for breastfeeding medicine doctors and others who are interested in a genuinely integrative, ethical,
so
lactation
needed
medicine space. There you go.
Yeah, so needed. And so all of the resources are so incredible and so needed. Why do you think that there is, because I mean, at least here in the States, there does seem to be still a very big gap between what we know from the research and what's actually being recommended to parents in office. Do you have any theories on why this is, like why there is such a big gap between what we see in the literature and what parents are being told?
Yeah. Well, I suppose the first thing is to say that it's quite common in health to have a gap between evidence and practice. This is some issues around dissemination, really, of the research, you might say, getting it out there. And in fact, whether this is actually true or not, but there was a paper once that estimated it's usually about a 17-year gap between what we know in the research and what's actually coming out in terms of clinical guidelines and support. So there is that sort of slowness of systems to catch up for a start. Although I'd argue with Possums, you see, we're skipping the gap because I'm constantly in the research. So we're really right at the sort of cutting edge, actually, of practice. So there is that. But then in our space, Rachael, our shared space, there's some big systemic obstacles. So one is the deeply entrenched dominance of the sleep training approaches, which I'm sure stuff you're thinking about constantly. Not even called sleep training these days. Parents don't even necessarily know that the advice they're getting, that they're told is facts about sleep, is actually completely shaped by what I would call first wave behaviorism, these sleep training approaches. So that much
and everybody has their own definitions now of what it means. So it's even more muddy now than it was when I first became a mom. It's even more confusing. Yeah.
It's interesting you say that. And I would say that there are paradigm shifts happening, but not flipping over into a completely new paradigm. So we have a lot of people talking about gentle or responsive care with sleep that's still using the extinction-based methods at heart. Even the idea of delaying responses or patting beside the baby or patting the baby when actually in their bones that parent knows the baby's actually wanting to be picked up. It's still not responding actually to the cues of the baby. So results, even these sort of hybrid approaches, result unfortunately in unnecessary distress for families, but communication confusion, you could say, between mums and bubs. Again, I know you're right across how distressing this can be for families. Whereas Possums was the first really internationally, the original shift over into a new paradigm. So we had breastfeeding advocates saying, go with the flow, go with the flow. We had our sleep training people saying, you've got to teach babies to sleep. We've got to move into monitoring the wake windows, delaying responses, sleep, breathe, sleep, all of that stuff, and nothing in between. And so we could have parents who were waking every hour, every 45 minutes, all night long, what in Possums I first called excessive night waking versus developmentally normal night waking. And so their two options were, and this is back prior to when I first started using the Possum Sleep Program as such, it was 2011. But before the publication that came out in 2014 with a psychologist colleague, Whittingham, where we said, okay, there's a middle paradigm, there's another paradigm. And in that article, I laid out the Possums approach, and we'd also co-integrated in the acceptance and commitment therapy and mental health support strategies. So, yes, so that sort of split. Now, I think your original question here was the gap between evidence and practice, right? So, and I was saying how sleep training is just so dominant. It's supported by our government-funded organisations. And I think it comes out of a very deep-seated belief that the way to be kindest to women in particular is to take control and teach the baby to sleep. And it's viewed as a very woman protective approach. But unfortunately, it can actually make everything so much more stressful for the family. It can worsen night wake. I'm telling you nothing new, I know, but
I'm just nodding. I'm just nodding vigorously the whole time you're talking.
For anyone listening in who's not sort of across it, and really interested to know a different perspective. So it can actually ramp up anxiety, create excessive night waking, create body clock misalignment between a bubby's body clock, toddler's body clock, and the parents, and actually result in terrible sleep struggles and distress within that family. So
and I think here too, I mean, because we have a lot of pediatricians here that push it, despite what evidence says about responsive feeding and responsive care and all of that stuff. And I think a big piece of it too is just they don't have the time with their patients to investigate, like, okay, is there something going on with feeding? Is there something going on with their body clock? Like, why is sleep so difficult for them? Or, it's this, we're trying to force sleep to happen in a crib when maybe they'd sleep beautifully if they were next to their mom, and those options and those potential underlying reasons are not really able to be investigated with a pediatrician, yet that's the person who parents are likely looking to for sleep advice.
Yeah. So I want to invite all those pediatricians to come in and do some courses with the NDC Institute. They'll find it through possums.org, because sleep is so deeply embedded in these other considerations. And the thing is, we can work within time constrained, because it is a big issue for doctors, all health professionals really, but let's say especially the pediatricians you're talking about there. But we can do this in time-constrained consultations as long as we're across this clinical set of strategies that translates the research into something that really works when you're sitting there with the family. So that's what I'd say to any pediatricians in the US that are listening. We've got quite a few in our courses. So.
Great. Yeah, I'm going to definitely recommend people look into that because we do need more education. And I think most pediatricians want to help their families and they want to be able to give advice that feels good to the family and feels realistic and doable for their life. It's just sometimes they just don't know what they don't know. Another thing you mentioned earlier, speaking about pediatricians too, is this kind of overdiagnosis in certain things with babies. So I'm going to take a quick break and then we're going to be right back and we're going to talk about reflux and things like that. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back with Dr. Pam and I want to ask you more about these feeding issues that are sometimes lumped in with sleep issues or vice versa, or babies are, as you have coined them, unsettled, right? They're very fussy. They cry a lot. They have difficulty with feeding. They have difficulty with sleep. They just seem really, really dialed up, as you call it. What are some of the potential reasons that parents could be experiencing a very unsettled baby? You mentioned one earlier was a potential reflux, but that's sometimes misdiagnosed or overdiagnosed. What do you make of those behaviors when you see unsettled, fussy babies?
Yes.
If you've ever wondered if the ingredients you're using or products you have in your home are safe while you're expecting, Safe Mom is the perfect app for you. Safe Mom is an ingredient checker app made for expecting moms and their partners, and it was made by a medical professional who experienced her own issues with reading labels during pregnancy. She knew there had to be a better way, so she created Safe Mom, where you can scan everyday products like cosmetics, skincare, sunscreens, and foods. All you have to do is open the app, scan a barcode, or take a picture of the product and get your results in seconds. There are saved, scanned products for easy reference, and you can shop from a list of over 100 pregnancy-safe products right from the app. With so much misinformation and fear-mongering around the internet, I would have loved having something like this as a resource when I was pregnant, and now I recommend it to all of my friends when they're expecting. Download Safe Mom on the App Store for free and start scanning risk-free for 7 days when you download it today. You can try it at home or bring it with you and try it at the store. That's Safe Mom. We recently remodeled our bathroom. It was our only bathroom for our big family of 5, and it was a complete disaster. It was so old, everything was broken. It really needed a total refresh. And the designer that I worked with recommended so many of our products sourced right from Wayfair. The tile that I shared that everybody went crazy for is incredible. It's so beautiful and unique, and it's from Wayfair. Just like a lot of our fixtures, our medicine cabinet, so many of the perfect pieces came together for our dream bathroom, and it was all thanks to Wayfair. Our designer knew that we wanted something beautiful and timeless with great taste, but we really didn't have a budget to be getting super high-end finishes. With using Wayfair, we didn't have to compromise what we wanted. We got the exact look we were going for. It looks so beautiful and chic, and we were able to stay within our budget. The delivery process was also completely seamless, so everything went according to plan, and we just couldn't be happier with the final result. Wayfair has over 20 million 5-star reviews, so you're not buying blind. You can see real customers, real photos and homes, and get real feedback before you add anything to your cart. If putting it all together by yourself sounds like a headache, they can handle not only the delivery, but also the installation and assembly. So you can just pick what you want and Wayfair will deal with the rest. This makes it such a perfect and seamless process for busy families. So if you are ready to upgrade your home for way less, head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home and get your space ready for less. That's WAYFAIR.com.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Well, what I'll do is talk to you about the Possums 5-domain approach to an unsettled baby. There is so much we could talk about in terms of the over-medicalisation or para-medicalisation or over-treatments, so, because there's so many diagnoses, labels that bubs with issues around breastfeeding or unsettled behaviour receive. Look at how we'd approach that from the Possums evidence-based perspective, really. And so again, just as you've been saying, Rachel, it's a multi-domain approach. So we work across 5 domains, and at the very outset, of course, make sure we don't have a baby with a medical condition, because 5% of our babies who cry a lot in these first, thinking here particularly the first 16 weeks of life, which is that time of neurological sensitivity, when our babies can be more vulnerable to crying and getting into crying bouts. We want to make sure there's nothing going on medically. That's really important, because sometimes there actually is. So it's really important that the babe's properly assessed. But then even with the idea of gut or wind pain, if we think baby gut now in this domain of what's happening with baby's health, there's a lot of interpreting babies dialing up, and I'm always talking about the dial on the sympathetic nervous system. There's a lot of tendency in our society to interpret babies dialing up as due to wind or gut pain or, of course, allergy, reflux, tongue tie when there's no classic tongue tie. But in fact, we usually when a little one is dialing up, there's something going on that we need to pay attention to if we can, but we don't need to be looking at those diagnoses. So it's true that when a baby dials up, the gut is like a second brain, and the gut activates even when they're rousing up out of sleep. The sympathetic nervous system starting to dial up, the gut's activating. And parents will hear very often like a gut event, like passing flatulence, or there might be a little puke or a swallowed back moment of reflux or whatever. That doesn't mean that the baby's dialing up because of gut problems. You can flip that, and it's the baby's dialing up, the sympathetic nervous system's dialing up, and then the gut gets active. Fussiness at the breast is very typically either the baby's done, but positional instability at the breast is a huge blind spot, I would propose, in our world. So many babies are dialing up at the breast because of positional instability that's not been picked up. And in the Possums programs as one small part really, but important part of the whole breastfeeding work that's for women, for parents on possums.org, we look closely at what's called the Gestalt method of fit and hold that really helps optimize that positional stability when issues are emerging. Nipple pain's another issue that can be a sign of positional instability. Then some bubs will develop a conditioned dialing up at the breast if they've, had experiences of positional instability, and that's the little one who just starts to cry when the mum even begins to bring the baby towards the breast, or as soon as the bub's on the breast, it's like they're really tense, and that's really tough. But there's strategies we can use to unravel that. So these are the sorts of things we're looking at when a baby's dialing up that aren't requiring sort of pathological explanations, but certainly require assistance. So if I move on, I won't try to cover everything because there's whole lists that we move through as clinicians. But if we move on from the baby's gut and health, then it's a big deal when we've got an unsettled baby to really think through the implications for the parents' emotional well-being and mental health. And again, I'll just park that now. But when we've got an unsettled baby, we've inevitably got stressed parents, right? It's just very upsetting.
Yeah.
So that's the second domain, huge, but I won't linger on it. Then we have the domain of feeds, what's happening around feeds. See, often when there's an unsettled baby, families are told that they've really got to burp the bub a lot or hold the baby upright after feeds, and we don't have to burp babies. I know it sounds really weird to say it. You've probably been saying it for a long time, Rachael, but we don't have to burp babies.
People are always shocked that I never burped my second and third babies. I was like, I just didn't.
That's it. We just want to make it all as easy as possible, and there's absolutely no reason to think it helps, actually. And again, I won't go into all of that, but it can be quite disruptive. So that's one thing with feeds to know. And we've talked about positional instability. Just occasionally we'll have a bub who really has a lactose overload when they're breastfeeding. That's the lady with the very generous supply. And there's just some strategies. It's a breastfeeding management challenge. So there's that. So that would be the feeds domain at a very high level running through it. Then sleep, huge, of course, huge, but often bubs become unsettled really sort of as part of this whole package that families are told they really need to be applying around baby sleep. That, they shouldn't be feeding bub off to sleep, for instance, which is very disruptive to biological cues, really. The baby wanting to feed off
it's
to
very
sleep.
hard to keep a feeding baby awake.
That's it. That's it. It's just a powerful biological cue. We might put that little one down and they wake up immediately, but that's because they've had all the sleep they need. It's just taken the edge off that rising sleep pressure. So it's the feeds territory, the sleep territory, and then this whole domain that I think you're interested to chat more about that's so important of meeting our little one's sensory motor needs.
One thing that I hear you say a lot, now that I'm so far, my oldest is almost 9, and he was my very unsettled baby. And he's got, a much more sensitive temperament anyway than my other kids. He just is wired that way. But I still always kind of wonder, I wonder how much of his dialed up nature in those first few months was because I was so stressed and because I was trying to do, drowsy but awake, and I was trying to do his feeds on a very strict schedule, and I was trying to do, eat, wake, sleep, play, or whatever those acronyms. Speaking of acronyms, there were all these acronyms that I was trying to follow and these perfect rules and perfect schedules I was trying to follow, and I was just a ball of anxiety. And I do wonder how much of the issue was actually that and not him at all. It's not to blame myself or to blame parents, but I think so often we don't realize how much our own stress is contributing to that cycle, right?
Yeah. So I guess I have a couple of thoughts when you say that. One is that in terms of a child's temperament, as you were saying, there's so much that's outside our control, isn't there? And our little ones, they're certainly shaped by family experience, family environment. They're also shaped by genetic kind of proclivities, tendencies, and then by the world around us. And so much in our life experiences is beyond our control, I think. Sometimes I think it's comforting for parents to know that, because we live in a world that gives us the idea that it's completely in our control, and if we stuff it up, we're going to be scarring them for life, and I don't
Right,
our little ones are so resilient, really. Families are so resilient. Overall, the complex system of a family, the complex system of a little bub actually has resilience inbuilt, and I think we often don't celebrate that enough. But it is true that we have these sort of very neurologically sensitive and plastic first weeks and months of life. Even then, I don't subscribe myself to the concept that parents, women are often hearing, that our stress, the baby catches our stress in a way. It's as if you hear this, it's as if our stress is contagious, and that then explains why the little one's so dialed up. I just feel sad, sometimes a bit cross when I hear women being told that. I say women, I would like to say that I acknowledge not all primary carers are women, and not all primary carers fall within binary genders either, but I'll say women because I'm talking to a majority experience. So I actually get quite sad about it, because it certainly makes women feel really guilty and even more and more anxious if they're being told that their anxiety somehow moves through the air and impacts on the baby's sense of well-being and anxiety. I actually don't see it that way at all. I think what matters is our behaviours. And the truth is, most of us, in these first months in particular, and especially with the first child, will carry at times high levels of stress and distress. But what matters, I think, to babies is patterns over time of our behaviours. And so the kind of responsive parenting that we strongly advocate in Possums doesn't even have to be perfect. You know yourself, as many listening in know, that by the time you get to your second or your third child, you just can't respond all the time anyway. Often you respond, but it doesn't seem to help. Right. So it's just about an intention to set up a pattern of responsiveness over time, even when it doesn't seem to be helping, and to experiment. And so I suppose when I hear the reflections on your eldest, I'm thinking, well, I know how hard you would have tried, because I just know parents try really, really hard, women try really, really hard and give it their absolute best shot, so much is outside our control. We're operating in all these societal pressures that tell us how to do it right. And what woman doesn't want to do it right? Like, you'll walk over hot coals for that baby. So if you're told this is the way to do it right, it's what you do. And, you know, we don't know how much is genetic, sociocultural. We're just giving it our best shot. So that's where my mind goes, you know.
I love that. That makes me feel so much better too, because, and I think you're right. No, I think you're right, because I think, you know, of course it's like this blaming, like, oh my gosh, if I were only more chill, but I'm a chill person and my husband is a very chill person. And there's all these messages too that you get, which is the opposite. Like you were saying, oh yeah, the stress isn't contagious, but people also act like your calmness is contagious. And like, oh, if you're just chill, if you're just calm, you'll have a really calm baby. And it's unfortunately just not that simple sometimes. They're their own little person. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
We're going to take one more quick break, and I do want to talk to you about sensory, which is one of my passions, when we come back.
Great.
Okay, we're back with Dr. Pam, and we've been talking so much about just the holistic view of your baby and their feeding and their sleep and all of this. And one thing that I am so incredibly interested in, because my background is as a special education teacher, and I worked with lots of occupational therapists, and occupational therapy has been so helpful for one of my own kids. And so I just love talking to parents and teaching them how to incorporate sensory into their day with their babies or their bigger kids, because it's just so helpful. It can help with everything from feeding to sleep to just overall, you know, behavior. And it's something that I don't think a lot of people talk about, but I know you talk about it all the time, which I love. So can you tell us a little bit about what you mean when you talk about like sensory nourishment? I think is the term I hear you use a lot.
It's true, Rachel. And I think you've sort of summarized why I think it's so absolutely vital for families to be across the importance of sensory motor nourishment. And it's true that Possums, my work, was the first to really integrate in concepts of sensory motor nourishment and infant care. Our OTs, as you'd be aware, had a particular take on sensory experiences, which was actually, particularly back then, was quite different to what I was integrating into my work with the Possums Sleep Program, but Possums programs more generally. So I do think, firstly, that our society still doesn't understand just how profoundly biologically embedded the hunger for rich and changing sensory motor experience is from infancy. I always say it takes a couple of weeks for that little one-term bub to sort of wake up, really, but from about 2 weeks, that hunger for sensory motor nourishment will cause a little one to cry inside the home, just because our interior environments are actually really low in sensory motor experience for babies, no matter how hard we try, actually. But as soon as we step outside the house, we're in a much more complex sensory experience and the motor experience too of movement.
When hunger strikes and I'm absolutely exhausted, or we're coming home from a trip or activities or camp or all the other fun things we want to do this summer, the last thing I want to do is stare at my empty fridge and try to figure out what we're going to cook for dinner. That's why I absolutely love Factor, because Factor has meals built around your goals, whether that's overall nutrition, more protein, or strength and workout recovery. And each meal is crafted with functional ingredients like lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole foods, and healthy fats. The best part is that they are fresh and never frozen, and there's over 100 rotating weekly meals, including globally inspired flavors like Mediterranean and Asian. So I absolutely never get bored. I always have something new and tasty to look forward to, and the quality is incredible. It tastes like you're eating a high-quality restaurant meal. You can also try the newly launched ready-to-eat salads, which I love for the summertime when it's too hot to eat warm food. And you can also add 70-plus add-ons to round out your nutrition. So from green juices to peanut butter energy bites, and everything's ready so quickly in just 2 minutes. Factor does all the shopping, prepping, and cooking, delivering straight to your door so you have more time for everything else that you want to do this summer. So head to factormeals.com/NoOneToldUs50off and use code NoOneToldUs50off to get 50% off and free daily greens per box with new subscriptions only, while supplies last until 9/27/2026. See the website for more details.
Your summer runs just got a boost of energy in Lululemon's Shake It Out shorts. Made in our ultra breezy lightweight Swift fabric, the Shake It Out shorts have a flowy, layered hem and a comfy built-in liner. These shorts keep you locked in for miles with distraction-free storage and a waistband that doesn't budge. They might just be the shortcut to your summer goals. Shop the Shake It Out shorts now at Lululemon.com.
And responding to moving through space, whether it's in the pram, the carrier, however family's doing it, or over the arm, whatever. Yeah, so babies cry when they're not receiving enough rich and changing sensory motor nourishment. And of course, that's often misinterpreted as, oh, it must be first tide sign, try to get baby down, which is often in an environment that has even less sensory motor nourishment, and we get lots of crying and distress. So in fact, creating days outside the home, just as you've been saying, you know, whether it's parent groups, visiting friends, shopping centre, out on the streets, getting in as much green and blue space as that primary carer possibly can into her days with her infant. That's so important to development, actually. We know the research shows that environmental enrichment opts infant development.
What do you, because I talk about this all the time and talk about how important it is to get out. And I think for all the reasons you just said, but also just helps you as the caregiver feel more sane to not be trapped in your house all day. But some people push back on this, and I do get it because I had babies that really hated being put in their car seats too. Sometimes parents will say, I would love to do this, but my baby just freaks out if I try to put them in the car seat or if I try to put them in the stroller so I can't get out, or they get so overstimulated is a term that people use a lot. What do you say about babies like that?
So I don't use the term overstimulated, a serious misconception. So the baby's dialing up. So what that parent is clearly noticing, is the baby's dialing up. So something's happening. The overstimulation lens, I think, is very unhelpful and misunderstands this fundamental biological need for patterns of rich and changing sensory motor nourishment. So what that baby might be telling us is that they hate the car capsule or they hate the car seat, arguably because it's a low sensory context where they can't really see, the parent. So then here we are in car cultures, right? And I just say to that primary carer, do you know what? It's so worth it to reach your destination and have an experience that's rich in sensory motor nourishment, in fresh new things, in social contact and interaction. That's so important for baby and their development, not to mention one's own emotional well-being as a primary carer, that it's worth it to get there. Now, that's not to say that parents are structuring in hours each day in a car with screaming baby, but that actually we do what we can. You know how it is. That primary care is constantly timing time in the car to see if they can, we do what we can.
Find the sweet spot.
To keep the little one as dialed down as we can. But this is one thing where I really feel quite strongly it's worth it. Feel quite convinced that it's in the family's best interests to reach those destinations, even if the little one's dialed up in the car, even if you're stopping and trying a feed halfway there, which often women do, but we just get there. Then we might have the pram situation where it is not uncommon actually for our little ones to develop a negative association with a stroller or pram, like a conditioned dialing up with the pram, and we want to try to avoid that. So we want to have as many positive experiences in that stroller or pram that we can. But if it's not working for the little one, I think it's important to take that bubby out. And that might be when you use the carrier. And in fact, here, don't know what it's like where you are, but here you see a lot of parents out. They're walking with the pram or the stroller and they've got the carrier on and the baby's just moving between the two.
Yes.
And because depending on the age,
or they've got like their toddler over one arm and baby in this arm, and they're pushing the stroller, and nobody wanted to be in the stroller today.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's it. Because the risk is if you keep pushing it, that you develop this condition dialing up with the pram, which is definitely not. It just makes it all harder. So we just try to grow the positive times in the pram, and then when it's not working, let it go, and then try again. Does that make sense?
Great. Yeah,
Have I
love
that question.
Yes, it makes total sense. And I love that advice too. And it's something I learned the hard way. But yeah, I started always packing a carrier or a wrap when I would take my son for a stroller walk because there was no way he would ever last in the stroller for the whole time. And I'd always have to wear him on the way home or something. But that was okay. That was how we got out and did what we needed to do for that day. So how does this sensory nourishment play into sleep? What does the research say about how this affects sleep or improves sleep for babies or little kids?
Yeah. So Possums Sleep Program, I first started to deliver it in 2011. It was right there at the forefront here on this topic of sensory motor nourishment. We, really sort of innovating and leading with that. There have been some studies in recent times that are starting to look more closely at activity and sleep and just corroborating what, I've been saying. Really, the only studies I think that are showing that a kind of educational program that integrates a baby's sensory motor needs is resulting in positive sleep outcomes for that family are the 5 evaluations that show the benefits of the Possums Sleep Program. One of them is an evaluation of Sleep Baby and You, which is the UK adaptation of the Possums Sleep Program, and that's also available amongst our courses. So I think it's those evaluations of the Possums Sleep Program that are really showing positive outcomes for integrating the sensory motor needs of a baby into how we make sense of healthy sleep for a family. Yeah, so in terms of the research. So the work in the occupational therapy literature around infant sensory needs, that's often with the older child, it's worked, you'd know this perhaps better than me, Rachel, looking at the sensory seeking, the little one who seems to be hypo in their needs. So looking at these extremes, they're sort of ways of making sense of the sensory needs of older children. I actually have the view, and this is all, so much of what we do in infant care is kind of theoretical, isn't it? Because there's still not anywhere near enough research, right? But I have the view that if we're telling parents to not let their babies get overstimulated, not interpreting bubbies dialing up, it's always being interpreted as overstimulation instead of possibly a need for more sensory motor stimulation, actually. This is likely in a small, vulnerable little subset who are genetically predisposed. It may not be at all good in terms of their outcome, and they may end up more likely to have disrupted behaviours, if you like, around their sensory needs. So it's my view that the best way to be sort of wrapping our little ones in the kind of approach to caring for them that's protective is to be really filling their life with lovely, rich, changing sensory motor nourishment. And we're listening to our bub's cues, you see, because we might be at a barbecue and we're passing the bubby round to the rallies, and next thing the little one's dialing up. Well, we respond to that and bring the baby back. I don't frame that as the bub's become overstimulated. The little one, for whatever reason, has dialed up, needs to be back wrapped in the parental arms. And another day may be very happy being passed around, grandma and the aunties. So is as long as we're paying attention to our baby's dial and experimenting with responses that overall keep our little one more or less dialed down as best we can over time, then we will be inevitably, that little one themselves are calibrating their sensory needs. We don't need to be overthinking it and trying to work out these concepts of overstimulation. I think it's a real misunderstanding that makes life harder than it needs to be for parents. We just go for rich and changing sensory motor stimulation, experiment with change of sensory environments in the context of frequent flexible milk, if we're talking the first 6 months.
Yes.
Frequent flexible.
I love that you keep talking too about experimentation. And I think that that's so important because as new parents, I think sometimes we really just want like a set of instructions or like some kind of roadmap because we have no idea what we're doing and we just want someone to tell us exactly what to do. And that's why different books and sleep training plans like that are so they're so attractive to parents because they do claim to give you this perfect system for how to do it. But I love that you talk about the beauty of experimentation and flexibility and really just learning your baby and tuning into their cues and switching if something doesn't work and going with it if it does work. I love that.
That's it. Because you're the expert on your baby. That parent, she's the expert on her baby. They're the experts on their baby. None of us know. None of us have any idea, really. we have a baby, what that baby's
Right.
communications mean. We just start this lifelong process of experimenting. I'll often say, and then they leave home at 18 or 20 and you're thinking, I was just getting the hang of it and now they're gone. Like it's just this one big experimenting journey.
That brings me to my last question, actually, which is a personal question. What is something that no one told you about parenting that you wish you had known in your own journey?
Yeah. So I do wish I would be lovely to have started that parenting journey with the kind of perspective I have now, which is that I'll give it my best, but actually there's a lot that's outside my control, and that life for both me, but also for my precious little child, will bring pain as well as joy. That messiness, it's what it's about, really. That is life. And so in a world where we're always being exhorted to be better, to be more whole, to get it right as parents, I wish that I'd had what I can now share with others, understanding that life is messier than we expect. Life hurts. We grow the joy. And that in many ways, it's outside our control.
Yeah, I love that. It's great advice. And you're right. It's the type of advice we can only give later once we've had that perspective. There's like just no way to know that the first time. It's so unfair.
And then self-compassion, self-compassion,
nonetheless.
self-compassion. Lots of self-compassion.
Yes, yes. I love that you weave that into your work too. We didn't get a chance to talk about it, but you can in a moment share all of your resources, because I do love the infant and parent mental health aspect that you bring into your work, and the acceptance and commitment therapy. And I talk all the time about radical acceptance, and it can be so, so helpful. So where can people find you and your work and your books and all of that?
Yes, thanks, Rachael. Well, Possums.org is our big ecosystem, and you'll find the multiple parent programs in there, the program on sensory motor nourishment, all of them, sleep, the breastfeeding work that goes into 3 layers depending on how much you want to dive in deep, but self-help there that's really quite comprehensive. So it's all there, even Little People Plus Food, the baby who's crying a lot, obviously the Possums Baby and Toddler Sleep program. I also have the Discontented Little Baby book that you can buy.
Yes.
And
I have it right here.
Oh, thanks, Rachael. There it is. That's it. Yeah, and it's also now in Italian. Yeah. It's in Italian and it's in Dutch. Oh. It's been translated into those 2 languages now. So there's that. And then actually in possums.org, I also run parent sessions online once a week.
Oh, amazing.
For parents who are members there. And then
great.
If there's health professionals listening into you, as I know there are, then you'll find it through possums.org, but there's the NDC Institute where we offer a whole range of resources for health professionals, starting with masterclasses in unsettled baby perinatal mental health, masterclass in breastfeeding, clinical skills, moving up through those who are NDC accredited. Now this I would like to share with you. There's a map where parents can find NDC accredited practitioners on possums.org.
Perfect.
Around the
that's amazing.
world, really, and many are doing telehealth. Although there'll be sort of constraints depending on particular countries there, but and so that's how parents can find NDC accredited practitioners. And then for those who are already NDC accredited, there is the option of the lactation fellowship. So it's a whole pathway through to the highest level of upskilling possible if a doctor or health professional wishes to undertake that. And so people will be coming out as NDC lactation consultants, NDC lactation fellows if they wish that as well, if they're health professionals. So I think that's
great. I hope people will take you up on that. Those are some incredible resources. I will make sure I link all of them too in the show notes so that people can very easily find them and click on what they need. I appreciate you coming on so much. I'm a huge fan of yours and of Possums, and I think that this will really help a lot of families hopefully stress less about sleep and feeding and all of the things that come along with having a baby in the first year. So thank you so much, Dr. Pam.
Thanks, Rachael, and thank you for all your vitally important work reaching families. It's just fabulous what you're doing. So thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. All right. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why customers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.